The first thing Evelyn Carter noticed was a silence. Not the peaceful kind. Not the kind that belonged inside churches or empty libraries. This silence carried weight. It sat heavily inside the enormous underground ballroom like something alive, something watching. Every polished marble surface reflected expensive power. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling in perfect symmetry, their golden light washing over rows of wealthy men seated behind black glass tables. No one smiled. No one spoke louder than necessary. And no one inside that room looked at the women standing on the stage like human beings. Evelyn stood perfectly still beneath the blinding lights, her fingers trembling slightly against the silk fabric covering her arms. The elegant cream-colored gown they had forced onto her was designed to create the illusion of luxury, but she understood what it really was. Packaging. The realization had settled into her chest hours earlier, when the black SUV transported her through hidden tunnels beneath the city. By then, denial no longer protected her from reality. She had already heard enough whispered conversations between guards to understand where she was being taken. An elite underground auction, not for paintings, not for diamonds, for people. And now she was standing among them. Women lined the stage beside her in carefully selected dresses, each one styled to appear expensive, controlled, desirable. Some stared blankly at the floor. Others fought to hide panic behind frozen expressions. A few had already emotionally disappeared somewhere deeper inside themselves. Evelyn refused to disappear. Fear clawed through her chest, but survival had taught her something important years ago. Panic only helped the people trying to break you. So instead of collapsing emotionally, she studied the room, every doorway, every armed guard, every hidden camera tucked into the architecture. She counted exits automatically, forcing her breathing to stay steady. Her stepfather used to call that stubbornness. But stubbornness had kept her alive through years of poverty, violence, and betrayal long before tonight. Her life had started falling apart years earlier, after her mother died unexpectedly. Debt consumed everything her family owned. Their small apartment disappeared first, then stability, then safety. Her stepfather drowned himself in gambling, alcohol, and desperate promises to dangerous men. At first, Evelyn believed his apologies. She believed his tears meant something. Until the night he locked her inside a stranger's car and walked away without looking back. That memory still lived beneath her skin. The realization that someone who raised her could sell her more easily than furniture or jewelry had permanently changed the way she viewed people. Since then, trust had become something dangerous. Now, standing beneath the auction lights, she understood the full extent of what he had done. He had not sold her into temporary debt. He had delivered her into an entire system built from corruption. The audience surrounding the stage represented every layer of hidden power America pretended did not exist. Wealthy businessmen sat beside politicians. Criminal buyers shared drinks with men who appeared on television preaching morality. Expensive watches flashed beneath chandelier light, while quiet negotiations unfolded through subtle nods and coded phrases. No one here feared consequences, because most of them controlled the people responsible for creating consequences. A woman near the front of the stage began crying softly after one buyer approached close enough to inspect her face like merchandise. The sound barely disturbed the room. One of the guards immediately dragged her away backstage. She did not return. Evelyn's stomach tightened. That single moment revealed the truth more clearly than anything else could. Inside this room, fear was normal. Humanity was not. A sharply dressed man stepped onto the center platform moments later, his silver tie reflecting the chandelier light as he welcomed the buyers with calm professionalism. His voice carried confidence polished through years of selling terrible things to powerful people. Numbers began appearing beside names on digital screens. The auction had officially started. Evelyn forced herself not to react as buyers evaluated the women standing under the lights. Some men whispered. Others casually raised small number paddles. Every movement felt disturbingly ordinary, which somehow made the entire experience even more horrifying. The world outside would never believe places like this existed. That thought stayed lodged inside Evelyn's mind as another woman beside her was sold and escorted away through side doors. Then another. Time lost meaning quickly. The deeper the auction continued, the colder Evelyn felt internally, not because she had stopped being afraid, but because her survival instincts were beginning to separate emotion from observation. Her mind focused only on details now. The guards rotated every 11 minutes. The left hallway remained less protected than the right. One camera near the balcony entrance malfunctioned every few seconds. She memorized everything, because as long as her mind kept searching for escape, she still belonged to herself. Then the atmosphere changed. Suddenly, completely, the shift happened before Evelyn even understood why. The buyer stopped talking first. Then the guard straightened almost nervously. Even the auction host lost confidence for half a second while staring toward the massive entrance doors across the ballroom. Fear moved through the room silently, like an invisible wave, and then he entered. Roman DeLuca did not walk into the auction hall like an ordinary man. He entered like someone accustomed to controlling every space around him without needing permission. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that looked expensive enough to fund entire families for years. His dark hair was neatly pushed back, revealing sharp features hardened by experience rather than age. Everything about him radiated dangerous restraint, but it was not his appearance that changed the room. It was his reputation. Even Evelyn recognized the name immediately. Roman DeLuca, the most feared Mafia don on the East Coast. Stories about him existed everywhere. Inside newspapers, criminal rumors, political scandals. Entire organizations disappeared after crossing him. Politicians publicly denied knowing him while secretly attending meetings in his private clubs. People described him differently depending on who was speaking. Some called him ruthless. Others called him untouchable. Most simply called him dangerous. And now he was standing inside the auction hall. The silence surrounding him felt heavier than before. Roman moved slowly through the ballroom, accompanied by several armed men who never spoke. No one stopped him. No one questioned why he had arrived without invitation. Power like his did not require invitations. Evelyn kept her gaze lowered at first, refusing to attract attention. Then Roman stopped walking and looked directly at her. The intensity of it unsettled her immediately, not because his expression carried cruelty, because it didn't. There was no visible hunger in his eyes, no satisfaction, no amusement, only calculation, as if he recognized something nobody else in the room had noticed yet. The auction host recovered quickly, forcing nervous enthusiasm back into his voice while announcing Roman's unexpected arrival. Several buyers attempted polite conversation, but Roman ignored them completely. His attention remained fixed on Evelyn. An uncomfortable tension spread across her chest. Instinct warned her that this man was far more dangerous than the others precisely because he appeared emotionally controlled. Then something unexpected happened. Roman spoke quietly to one of his men. Within seconds, armed guards positioned themselves across the ballroom exits. Confusion spread immediately through the audience. The auction host attempted to continue speaking, but Roman finally interrupted him with only a few calm words. An entire room obeyed. No shouting. No threats, no visible violence. Yet somehow the auction ended instantly. Buyers lowered their paddles. Politicians avoided eye contact. Even hardened criminals looked uneasy beneath Roman's attention. Whatever authority controlled this hidden world, Roman clearly stood above it. Evelyn watched the entire situation unfold with growing confusion. Why would someone like him shut the auction down? And why was he still looking at her? Roman approached the stage slowly. His expression revealed nothing as he stopped directly in front of her. Up close, he looked even more intimidating, not because he appeared angry, but because he appeared emotionally unreadable, like someone capable of terrible things without hesitation. Evelyn prepared herself mentally for whatever came next, but Roman never touched her. Instead, he simply motioned toward the exit. One of his men stepped forward immediately, escorting her away from the stage while the rest of the room remained completely silent. No one protested. No one challenged him. Fear followed Roman more effectively than weapons ever could. As Evelyn walked beside the armed escorts through the massive ballroom doors, a terrifying realization settled inside her mind. If even criminals feared this man, what exactly had she just been handed over to? Outside, Cold night air hit her skin sharply as black luxury vehicles waited beside the private entrance. Roman emerged moments later, surrounded by bodyguards. Still silent, still watching everything, Evelyn entered the SUV carefully, her pulse hammering harder with every passing second. The vehicle doors locked automatically behind her. Within moments, the convoy began disappearing into the city streets. She stared forward quietly, trying to understand whether she had escaped something terrible or entered something far worse. Then Roman adjusted his sleeve slightly beneath the passing city lights, and Evelyn froze. A dark red stain marked the silver cufflinks beneath his wrist. Fresh blood, not old, not accidental. The realization hit her instantly. Roman DeLuca had almost certainly killed someone shortly before entering that auction hall, and now she was alone inside a locked vehicle with him. The convoy traveled for nearly 2 hours before the city finally disappeared behind them. At first, Evelyn tried memorizing the roads, street signs, bridges, exit numbers. But eventually the glowing skyline faded into isolated highways surrounded by dense forests and distant mountains. Civilization slowly vanished until the only visible lights belonged to Roman DeLuca's vehicles cutting through the darkness. No one inside the SUV spoke. Roman remained seated across from her in complete silence, his expression unreadable beneath the passing reflections of headlights. The blood on his cufflinks had dried by then, but Evelyn could not stop thinking about it. People did not carry fresh blood into luxury auctions unless violence followed them naturally, and Roman DeLuca wore violence too comfortably. Still, what unsettled her most was not his reputation. It was his restraint. The entire ride, he never once looked at her the way the buyers at the auction had. He did not touch her, did not threaten her, did not even ask questions. That should have comforted her. Instead, it made her nervous, because unpredictable men were often more dangerous than openly cruel ones. The gates finally appeared just after midnight. Massive black iron barriers emerged from the darkness, like something guarding a private kingdom. Armed security personnel stood watch beside surveillance towers hidden among the trees. Cameras rotated silently above stone walls, stretching far beyond Evelyn's line of sight. Roman's estate looked less like a home and more like a fortress designed for war. As the gates slowly opened, Evelyn caught her first glimpse of the mansion itself. The property rose from the hillside like an enormous Gothic cathedral redesigned for modern wealth. Towering windows reflected moonlight across black stone architecture. Marble staircases curved toward massive entrance doors guarded by armed men dressed in tailored suits rather than uniforms. Everything about the estate projected terrifying elegance. Beauty wrapped around danger so seamlessly that the two had become impossible to separate. The convoy stopped near the front entrance, and Roman exited first without waiting for assistance. The guards around him moved carefully, constantly scanning the property with trained precision. Fear lived here openly. Evelyn stepped out slowly, immediately noticing how the staff avoided direct eye contact with Roman. Servants standing near the entrance lowered their heads almost automatically whenever he passed. Even the armed guards appeared tense around him. Respect was part of it, but fear was stronger. A woman in her late 40s approached Evelyn carefully and introduced herself as Mrs. Laurent, the estate's head housekeeper. Her hand shook slightly while guiding Evelyn inside. That detail mattered. People accustomed to violence learned how to recognize fear instinctively. And everyone inside this mansion feared Roman DeLuca. The interior looked even more surreal than the exterior. Towering ceilings stretched above marble floors polished perfectly enough to reflect chandelier light. Massive paintings lined the hallways, most depicting old European cities, storms over oceans, or men standing beside battlefields. The atmosphere carried the weight of old money mixed with something darker, like history stained by blood. Evelyn remained alert as she walked deeper into the mansion. Every corridor contained security cameras, subtly hidden inside antique decorations. Armed guards stood near staircases pretending not to watch her. This was not simply a home. It was a controlled environment. Mrs. Laurent eventually stopped outside an enormous bedroom overlooking the eastern gardens. The room itself was larger than Evelyn's entire childhood apartment. Elegant furniture, expensive fabrics, private bathroom, balcony access. Everything looked carefully designed for comfort. Comfort meant nothing inside a lock cage. "You will stay here," Mrs. Laurent said quietly before quickly leaving. The bedroom door closed softly behind her, then locked from the outside. Evelyn stared at it for several seconds before exhaling slowly. So this was the truth. Luxury imprisonment still remained imprisonment. She spent the next hour studying the room carefully. Windows reinforced. Balcony positioned too high for safe escape. Security cameras absent inside the bedroom itself, but likely surrounding the hallways outside. Roman clearly valued control. Still, something felt unusual. No threats had been made. No rules explained. No demands forced onto her. That uncertainty disturbed Evelyn more than cruelty would have. The following morning answered part of that confusion. Roman summoned her downstairs shortly after sunrise. Evelyn prepared herself mentally before entering the dining hall, expecting manipulation disguised as politeness. Instead, she found Roman seated alone near the enormous windows overlooking the estate grounds. Sunlight cut sharply across his features, revealing faint bruising near his jawline. She had not noticed earlier. Evidence of recent violence. He glanced toward her briefly, but said nothing at first. A maid quietly placed breakfast on the table before immediately leaving. Roman finally spoke after several moments of silence. "There are rules in this house." His voice remained calm, controlled. Evelyn waited carefully. "You stay inside the estate unless I approve otherwise. Certain parts of the mansion are restricted. If security tells you to leave an area, you leave." No threats followed. No intimidation. Just instructions. Evelyn studied him cautiously. "And if I refuse?" Roman met her gaze fully for the first time since the auction. "Then you make dangerous people notice you." The answer carried no anger. Somehow, that made it more unsettling. He stood moments later, adjusting his cuffs before walking toward the exit. "You're safer here than anywhere else right now." Then he left. Just like that. No explanation. No attempt to control her physically. Evelyn watched him disappear through the hallway, with growing suspicion tightening inside her chest, because nothing about this situation made sense. Over the next several days, the mansion slowly revealed itself piece by piece, and every piece carried secrets. Roman rarely appeared during daytime hours. When he did, the atmosphere inside the estate changed immediately. Conversations stopped. Staff straightened nervously. Guards became more alert. His presence controlled the mansion even in silence. That silence allowed Evelyn to observe the people surrounding him. Vincent Hale was the first. Tall, silver-haired, and permanently composed, Vincent carried himself like someone who belonged inside political offices rather than criminal organizations. He acted as Roman's advisor, overseeing meetings and communications across the estate. But beneath his calm professionalism, Evelyn sensed calculation. Vincent watched everyone carefully, especially her. Then there was Sophia Moretti. Unlike the others, Sophia did not appear afraid of Roman. Elegant, intelligent, and emotionally sharp, she moved through the mansion with quiet authority. Rumors among staff suggested her family had long-standing ties to Roman's organization. Still, Sophia treated Evelyn strangely, not with cruelty, but with curiosity, almost concern. Marcus Kane frightened Evelyn most. Roman's head of security looked built entirely from violence. Scarred hands, cold eyes, constant vigilance. Marcus trusted nobody, and his gaze followed Evelyn everywhere she went. If Roman represented controlled danger, Marcus represented what happened when control disappeared completely. As days passed, Evelyn slowly pieced together fragments of the truth surrounding this state. Roman had recently survived betrayal from someone inside his own organization. Multiple rival factions were fighting quietly for power, and somewhere beyond the mansion walls, powerful enemies actively wanted Roman dead. That explained the security, but not her presence there. One evening, curiosity finally overcame caution. Evelyn began exploring the mansion alone after midnight. The estate felt entirely different at night. Hallways stretched endlessly beneath dim lighting, while distant security footsteps echoed through the silence. Most staff had disappeared into private quarters, leaving only guards monitoring entrances and surveillance stations. Evelyn moved carefully, memorizing pathways as she explored. Then she found the first hidden detail. A concealed surveillance room behind a decorative library wall. Rows of monitors displayed nearly every section of the estate grounds. Security feeds rotated constantly. Gardens, hallways, gates, tunnels beneath the property. Tunnels. Evelyn froze slightly while studying blueprints displayed across one monitor. The mansion contained hidden underground pathways, extending far beyond the visible structure. Escape routes, or smuggling routes. Possibly both. Her pulse quickened as she continued exploring deeper sections of the mansion. Eventually, she discovered something stranger, an isolated corridor hidden behind locked iron doors. One room at the end stood partially open. Dust covered most surfaces inside, as though nobody had entered for years. But the belongings remained untouched. Women's clothing, jewelry, books beside the bed. A framed photograph faced downward near the nightstand. Evelyn slowly picked it up. A young woman stared back at her from a photograph. Beautiful, elegant, smiling naturally beside the estate gardens downstairs. Written faintly across the back were two words, Clara Vane. Evelyn's stomach tightened, because she recognized the name. Clara Vane had disappeared 3 years earlier after attending a private charity event connected to Roman DeLuca's organization. News outlets briefly covered the story before it vanished mysteriously from public attention. And now her belongings sat hidden inside Roman's mansion. Forgotten, abandoned. A terrifying realization settled into Evelyn's mind. Every locked room inside this estate probably carried someone's ghost. Suddenly, footsteps echoed behind her. Evelyn turned sharply. Roman stood silently in the doorway. For one dangerous moment, neither of them spoke. His expression darkened slightly as he noticed the photograph in her hands. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. Evelyn forced herself not to step backward. What happened to her? Roman's eyes lingered on the room for several seconds before answering. She made the mistake of trusting the wrong people. That sounds like avoidance. His jaw tightened faintly. Curiosity keeps getting you close to dangerous things. Evelyn held his gaze despite the fear rising beneath her skin. And yet you keep letting me wander freely. That question lingered between them heavily, because neither of them fully understood the answer. Roman eventually stepped aside, allowing her to leave the room without punishment. Again, the restraint unsettled her more than violence would have. By the following week, Evelyn noticed something else disturbing. Roman protected her. Subtly, whenever unfamiliar guests arrived at the estate, she disappeared from public areas immediately. Certain men were denied access to the mansion entirely after asking about her presence. One wealthy politician left visibly shaken after a private meeting with Roman regarding boundaries. Whatever Roman intended, he clearly did not view her the same way the auction buyers had. That contradiction became emotionally dangerous, because fear was slowly beginning to mix with curiosity, and curiosity had destroyed smarter people than her. Late one night, unable to sleep, Evelyn wandered near the Easter hallway, overlooking the private courtyard below. Voices interrupted the silence. Low, urgent. She carefully approached the staircase shadows and froze. Several armed men had entered the estate through the side gates without announcement. Marcus Kane escorted them aggressively toward Roman's private office, while guards sealed surrounding hallways. Something was wrong. Evelyn moved closer quietly, just enough to hear fragments through the partially closed doors. Then one sentence cut through the silence, sharply enough to stop her breathing. The girl was never supposed to survive the auction. The sentence refused to leave Evelyn's mind. The girl was never supposed to survive the auction. For the rest of the night, those words echoed through her thoughts like a warning buried beneath every hallway of Roman DeLuca's estate. Sleep became impossible. Every shadow inside the mansion suddenly carried different meaning. Every locked door felt connected to something larger than organized crime, because auctions like that existed for profit, not mistakes, which meant someone powerful had wanted her dead long before Roman entered that ballroom. The realization changed everything. By sunrise, the estate no longer felt like a prison alone. It felt like a battlefield she did not understand yet. The tension inside the mansion worsened dramatically the following morning. Security doubled overnight. Armed guards moved through corridors with visible urgency, while black SUVs arrived continuously through the front gates. Staff whispered nervously behind closed doors. Even Marcus Kane looked more aggressive than usual, his hand never straying far from the weapon beneath his jacket. Something had happened. Evelyn sensed it before she heard the details. She caught fragments while passing near Roman's private office later that afternoon. Voices carried sharply through the partially closed doors. 3 shooters. Inside the perimeter? They knew his route. The conversation stopped abruptly when footsteps approached from inside. Evelyn moved away before anyone noticed her listening, but the message was already clear. Someone had tried to kill Roman. Again, hours later. Sophia Moretti quietly confirmed the suspicion without directly saying it. She found Evelyn standing beside the eastern balcony overlooking the estate grounds, where additional guards now patrol with military precision. The lockdown may last several days, Sophia explained calmly. Evelyn studied her carefully. Because of the attack? Sophia's expression shifted slightly, almost impressed. You hear more than people realize. That's usually safer. A faint sadness crossed Sophia's face at that answer. Not always in this world. Before Evelyn could press further, Sophia walked away, leaving behind more questions and clarity. That had become a pattern inside the mansion. Everyone knew pieces of the truth. No one revealed enough to complete it. Over the next several days, the atmosphere inside the estate transformed completely. Roman rarely appeared publicly anymore. Meetings lasted late into the night behind heavily guarded office doors, while unfamiliar men arrived carrying briefcases, maps, and encrypted files. Mafia politics were shifting, and somehow Evelyn sat directly at the center of it. She noticed it in subtle ways first. The guards assigned outside her bedroom changed every 6 hours instead of every 12. Marcus personally escorted her through restricted hallways whenever movement became necessary. Visitors were searched more aggressively before entering the estate. Roman's enemies were not merely watching anymore. They were hunting. One evening, while passing to the lower library corridors, Evelyn overheard 2 guards discussing her in hushed voices. She doesn't even know who her father really was. That's exactly the problem. The words froze her instantly. Her father, not stepfather, not family, father. By the time she turned the corner, the guards had already gone silent, but the damage was done. The question followed her everywhere afterward. Who exactly had her biological father been? Growing up, her mother avoided discussing him entirely. Evelyn only remembered fragments, an old photograph hidden inside a drawer, whispered arguments late at night, and one terrifying memory of her mother burning documents in the kitchen sink while crying silently. Back then, Evelyn believed grief caused the secrecy. Now she suspected fear. That night, curiosity overcame caution again. Evelyn returned to the hidden surveillance room beneath the mansion library, using timing patterns she had memorized from security rotations. The estate cameras revealed blind spots every few minutes during system resets. Just enough time. She moved through the concealed corridor carefully until she reached the underground archive rooms connected to Roman's private network. Dust-covered filing cabinets lined the concrete walls beside shelves filled with burned folders, encrypted drives, and old surveillance tapes. It looked less like organized crime storage and more like evidence collected over decades. Evelyn searched carefully, scanning names and dates until one folder stopped her cold. Carter. Her hands tightened instantly. Inside were newspaper clippings, photographs, financial records, and classified reports connected to a man named Daniel Carter, her biological father. Evelyn's breathing slowed as she read. Daniel Carter had once worked as a federal financial investigator specializing in organized crime networks. Years earlier, he had uncovered connections between political leaders, trafficking operations, and international criminal syndicates operating through legitimate corporations. Then he vanished. Official reports claimed he disappeared during an overseas investigation, but the files inside Roman's archive told a different story. Daniel Carter had been hunted because he discovered something powerful enough to threaten multiple criminal organizations simultaneously. Evelyn sat frozen beneath the dim archive lighting while the truth slowly unfolded around her. Her father had not abandoned them. He had been erased. A deeper horror followed immediately after. The auction had never truly been about selling women for profit alone. It had been designed to eliminate loose ends. And Evelyn herself was one of those loose ends. An intellectual realization settled heavily into her thoughts then, sharper than fear itself. The people hunting her were not afraid of what she knew. They were afraid of what she might eventually remember. Childhood memories suddenly felt dangerous. Fragments resurfaced unexpectedly. Strange visitors entering their apartment late at night, her mother hiding boxes beneath floorboards, unfamiliar men watching them from parked vehicles. Things that once felt meaningless now looked calculated. Evelyn continued searching the files until another detail stopped her completely. Roman DeLuca's name appeared repeatedly throughout the investigation records, not as an enemy, as an observer. Her stomach tightened painfully. Roman had known who she was before entering the auction. The realization struck harder than expected. Every interaction inside the mansion instantly changed meaning. His restraint, the security, the protection. None of it had been coincidence. He chose her deliberately. Fury surged through Evelyn fast enough to overpower fear. For days she had struggled to understand him. Now she realized he had manipulated the entire situation from beginning. She stormed upstairs immediately, barely noticing the guards attempting to stop her before reaching Roman's office. Marcus intercepted her first. "You can't enter right now." Evelyn's eyes burned with anger. "Move." Marcus remained unmoving. Then Roman's voice emerged calmly from inside the office. "Let her in." The doors opened slowly. Roman stood beside the massive windows overlooking the state grounds, his expression unreadable as always. Several men immediately exited the room, leaving him alone in tense silence. Evelyn threw the investigation file across his desk. "You knew?" Roman glanced at the folder, without surprise. "Yes." The calmness of his answer only intensified her anger. "You brought me here because of my father?" "I brought you here because you would have died otherwise. That wasn't your decision to make." "No," Roman admitted quietly, "but it became necessary." Evelyn stared at him in disbelief. "You watched me get sold." Roman's jaw tightened slightly. "I stopped it. After letting it happen." Silence filled the office heavily. For the first time since meeting him, Evelyn saw something unfamiliar flicker behind Roman's controlled expression. Regret, brief, almost invisible, but real. Still, it changed nothing. "You had no right," she said coldly. Roman looked toward the city skyline beyond the windows before answering. "In my world, right stopped mattering a long time ago." The statement carried exhaustion rather than arrogance. That disturbed Evelyn more than anger would have, because despite everything she learned, part of her had begun searching for reasons to trust him. Now betrayal poisoned that instinct completely. The days following her confrontation grew colder emotionally. Evelyn avoided Roman whenever possible. Yet the mansion itself became increasingly dangerous around her. News spread quickly across criminal networks that Roman DeLuca was protecting Daniel Carter's daughter. That made her valuable and vulnerable. New names began surfacing constantly during overheard meetings and intercepted conversations. Most alarming among them was Adrian Voss. Unlike Roman, Adrian ruled through chaos instead of control. His organization expanded rapidly through trafficking, political assassinations, and private military operations across international borders. Rumors described him as unpredictable even among criminals. And now Adrian wanted Evelyn. Roman responded by increasing security around her aggressively. Additional guards followed her movements throughout the estate. Surveillance intensified. Entire wings of the mansion became inaccessible during certain meetings. At first, Evelyn interpreted it as control. Then she started noticing the consequences. Roman canceled strategic negotiations whenever rival organizations demanded access to her. He rejected financial alliances that required transferring her location. He even turned away influential political figures after they questioned why she remained alive. Each decision weakened his position. Each decision protected her anyway. That contradiction slowly became emotionally dangerous again, because monsters were easy to hate when they acted like monsters consistently. Roman did not. One storm-filled evening, Evelyn witnessed another side of him entirely. She accidentally entered the West Corridor while Marcus escorted Roman back from a private meeting. Blood stained Roman's shirt near his ribs, and exhaustion shadowed his expression beneath the hallway lights. He had clearly been injured. Yet his first reaction upon noticing Evelyn was not irritation. It was concern. You shouldn't be wandering alone. The statement felt absurd considering his condition. Evelyn stared at the blood instead. You're hurt. It's handled. Marcus looked visibly impatient beside him. But Roman remained focused on Evelyn for several seconds longer than necessary. Something unspoken lingered there. Not trust, not affection, but recognition. As if both of them understood survival too well to fully hate each other anymore. That realization frightened Evelyn more deeply than fear itself, because emotional dependence could become another form of captivity, and she refused to belong to anyone again. Late that night, unable to quiet the storm inside her thoughts, Evelyn returned underground searching for answers powerful enough to destroy confusion permanently. Instead, she found something worse. Deep beneath the mansion archive rooms, hidden inside a locked steel cabinet, sat a small collection of old photographs bound together with classified documents. One picture immediately caught her attention. A young girl standing beside a woman outside a crowded train station, nearly 15 years earlier. The little girl was unmistakably Evelyn, and written beside the photograph in black ink was another name, Roman DeLuca. The photograph destroyed whatever fragile trust Evelyn still carried inside her. For nearly an hour, she sat alone in the underground archive room beneath Roman DeLuca's mansion, staring at the image spread across her trembling hands. The faded picture looked harmless at first glance, a mother holding her daughter's hand outside an old train station somewhere in Chicago. But Roman's name written beside it changed everything. 15 years earlier, long before the auction, long before the mansion, long before Evelyn even knew men like Roman DeLuca existed, he had known about her for years. The realization poisoned every memory connected to him. Every moment of protection now felt calculated. Every unanswered question felt manipulative. Even his restraint began looking less like morality and more like control, disguised as patience. And Evelyn suddenly understood something terrifying. The mansion had never been an accident. She had been brought there intentionally. That truth made staying impossible. Over the next several days, escape became her only focus. She stopped searching for emotional answers and began searching for structural weaknesses instead. Survival instinct sharpened again, colder and clearer than before. The estate itself slowly unfolded inside her mind like a map. Security rotations, camera blind spots, guard behaviors, emergency tunnel systems beneath the mansion. Every detail mattered. The storm arrived 3 nights later. Heavy rain slammed against the estate windows while violent thunder rolled across the mountains surrounding Roman's property. Wind bent enormous trees lining the outer walls, creating brief interruptions across the surveillance systems Marcus Kane depended on. Perfect conditions. Evelyn moved carefully through the eastern corridors shortly after midnight, wearing dark clothing stolen from one of the unused storage rooms downstairs. She carried no bags, no unnecessary items, only a small envelope containing copied documents about her father. The mansion felt unusually tense that night. Additional guards patrolled the lower floors, while several black SUVs disappeared to the front gates toward the city. Something important was happening elsewhere. That distraction created opportunity. Evelyn reached a hidden underground passage beneath the library exactly 6 minutes before the next security rotation. Rainwater leaked faintly through cracks in the concrete ceiling as emergency lights flickered above the tunnel walls. For a brief moment, she hesitated, not because she feared getting caught, because a small, dangerous part of her wondered whether leaving was actually safer than staying. That thought disturbed her immediately. No place controlled by Roman DeLuca could ever become emotionally safe, so she kept moving. The underground passage eventually led toward an abandoned maintenance road nearly half a mile beyond the estate walls. Cold rain soaked through Evelyn's clothes instantly as she emerged into the storm-covered forest surrounding the property. Freedom. The word felt different than she imagined. Not exciting, not relieving, terrifying. For the first time in her life, Evelyn realized freedom could feel more frightening than captivity. Inside Roman's mansion, at least the dangers were visible. Outside, The entire world suddenly became uncertain again. Still, she forced herself forward through the storm. By sunrise, Evelyn had reached the outskirts of a small industrial town, nearly 20 miles from the estate. Exhaustion weighed heavily through her body, but adrenaline kept her moving. She avoided surveillance cameras whenever possible, changed transportation twice using stolen cash from the emergency tunnel storage, and never stayed visible long enough to attract attention. Years of surviving unstable homes and dangerous neighborhoods had taught her one thing well: disappear before people notice you exist. Meanwhile, Roman discovered her absence less than 40 minutes after she escaped. The reaction inside the mansion was immediate. Marcus Kane sealed the estate. Armed teams mobilized across multiple counties. Vincent Hale initiated private contacts inside law enforcement, while security systems tracked every possible route Evelyn might have taken. The organization prepared for pursuit, but Roman stopped them. The confrontation happened inside the mansion's war room shortly before dawn. "She knows too much," Marcus argued coldly. "If Voss finds her first." "He won't," Roman interrupted. Vincent studied Roman carefully across the table. "Then we retrieve her immediately." Roman's expression remained unreadable. "No." Silence followed instantly. Even Marcus looked stunned. "You're letting her walk away?" he asked. Roman's jaw tightened faintly. "No one touches her." The order spread confusion through the entire organization, because in Roman DeLuca's world, people rarely escaped voluntarily, and those who did were usually hunted. Evelyn was not. That decision cost Roman immediately. Rival organizations interpreted her escape as weakness. Internal allies questioned his judgment. Several political contacts quietly withdrew support after hearing rumors that Roman had allowed an emotionally compromised situation to interfere with business. For the first time in years, Roman's authority showed cracks. And somewhere beneath all of it, he understood the truth he refused to admit aloud. He wanted Evelyn to choose freedom while she still could, even if it destroyed everything else. Evelyn remained unaware of the consequences unfolding behind her. For nearly 2 days, she survived alone across forgotten sections of the city, sleeping inside abandoned subway maintenance stations and avoiding crowded public areas. Every unfamiliar car triggered suspicion. Every stranger felt potentially dangerous. Paranoia became survival. But isolation also gave her something unexpected: perspective. Distance from Roman's presence allowed her mind to reorganize everything she had learned. The deeper she analyzed the situation, the less certain she became about him. Yes, he manipulated events. Yes, he hid the truth. But he also protected her repeatedly when simpler solutions existed. And now he was allowing her to disappear entirely. That contradiction refused to make sense. On the third night, Evelyn finally encountered someone connected to her father. The meeting happened accidentally inside a deteriorating diner near the freight district outside Baltimore. Evelyn only entered because exhaustion and cold rain had become unbearable. She chose a corner booth automatically, keeping her back near the emergency exit while studying everyone inside the restaurant. One elderly man noticed her almost immediately. He approached slowly, carrying visible hesitation beneath his calm expression. "You have your father's eyes," he said quietly. Evelyn froze. The man introduced himself as Leonard Graves, a former investigative journalist who once worked alongside Daniel Carter years earlier. At first, Evelyn assumed it was another trap, but Leonard knew details impossible for strangers to fabricate: her mother's name, the apartment they once lived in, even the old music box Daniel Carter bought for Evelyn shortly before disappearing. The memories felt painfully real. Leonard eventually revealed truths even Roman had hidden. Years earlier, Roman DeLuca attempted leaving organized crime entirely after internal betrayals nearly destroyed his family. According to Leonard, Roman secretly cooperated with select investigators trying to expose trafficking operations and corrupt political networks, including Daniel Carter. But the alliance collapsed after multiple leaks exposed their activities. Daniel vanished soon afterward. Roman survived by returning to violence more ruthless than before. "People think men like Roman are born monsters," Leonard explained carefully. "Most become monsters after learning mercy gets people killed." The statement unsettled Evelyn deeply, because it humanized Roman in ways she did not want. Before leaving, Leonard handed her a small encrypted drive connected to Daniel Carter's investigation files. "Your father died trying to expose people powerful enough to rewrite reality," he warned quietly. "If Roman protected you, there was a reason." Evelyn left the diner emotionally shaken. The world no longer divided itself cleanly between villains and victims anymore, and that frightened her. Unknown to Evelyn, Roman tracked her movements the entire time, not closely enough to trap her, only closely enough to ensure she remained alive. Marcus hated it. "You're risking the organization for someone who doesn't trust you," he warned during one tense phone call. Roman stared silently across the rain-covered city skyline, outside his private penthouse office. "She shouldn't." Marcus paused. "Then why protect her?" For the first time in years, Roman struggled to answer immediately, because somewhere between the auction and her escape, Evelyn Carter had stopped feeling like an obligation tied to old investigations and started feeling dangerously personal. That realization unsettled him more than any rival syndicate ever had. Unfortunately, Adrian Voss moved faster than expected. 3 nights later, Evelyn noticed the surveillance almost immediately. Different vehicles appearing repeatedly, men lingering too long near intersections, a motorcycle following her through multiple districts. Her instincts screamed danger. She abandoned public transportation instantly and disappeared through abandoned industrial alleys bordering the Harbor District. Rain hammered the pavement while distant thunder rolled across the skyline again, mirroring the night she escaped the mansion. But this time, she was truly alone, or so she believed. The attack came suddenly. 2 armed men cornered her near an abandoned shipping warehouse, while additional figures emerged from surrounding alleys. Their movements looked professional, coordinated, not random criminals. One man grabbed Evelyn violently before she could escape. "You've caused very expensive problems," he muttered coldly. Panic surged through her chest as more footsteps approached through the rain. Then gunfire exploded across the alley. The man holding Evelyn collapsed instantly. Chaos followed. Bodies hit concrete. Screams disappeared beneath thunder. Several attackers turned toward the shadows too slowly before bullets tore through them with terrifying precision. Evelyn stumbled backward in shock, and Roman DeLuca emerged from the darkness covered in blood. Not alone. Marcus Kane appeared behind him, dragging another wounded man across the pavement before throwing him violently against the warehouse wall. Evelyn recognized the injured figure immediately. Vincent Hale, Roman's oldest advisor. Blood covered Vincent's mouth as he looked toward Roman with disbelief. "You chose her," Vincent rasped weakly. Roman's expression remained colder than Evelyn had ever seen before. "No," he answered quietly. "You betrayed me." The gunshot echoed through the alley a second later, and Vincent Hale collapsed lifelessly onto the rain-soaked concrete. Rain continued pouring over the abandoned harbor, while Vincent Hale's body lay motionless against the warehouse wall. For several seconds, nobody moved. The sound of distant thunder mixed with the metallic echo of the gunshot, still hanging in the air. Blood slowly spread across the wet pavement beneath Roman's shoes while the surviving attackers disappeared into the darkness, unwilling to continue fighting after witnessing Roman DeLuca execute his own closest advisor without hesitation. Evelyn stood frozen nearby, struggling to process what she had just witnessed. Vincent Hale had not been merely another employee inside Roman's empire. He had been family, trusted for years, respected by everyone. And now Roman had killed him himself. Not out of rage, out of certainty. That distinction unsettled Evelyn more deeply than violence ever had. Marcus Kane approached cautiously after checking the alley perimeter for additional threats. His expression remained cold, but even he looked disturbed by the betrayal. "More of Voss's men will be coming," he warned quietly. Roman lowered the weapon slowly, his face unreadable beneath the rain. "Then we move now." His attention shifted toward Evelyn immediately afterward, not toward the bodies, not toward Marcus, toward her. "You're hurt." The question caught Evelyn off guard. She stared at him silently for a moment, trying to understand how someone capable of such brutality could still sound concerned in the same breath. "No," she answered finally. Roman nodded once before leading them toward the waiting vehicles hidden beyond the warehouses. The drive back to the estate passed in tense silence, but the atmosphere inside the SUV felt entirely different than before. Something irreversible had changed, not because Roman rescued her, because he destroyed one of the most important men in his organization to do it. That level of sacrifice carried consequences Evelyn did not fully understand yet. By sunrise, the entire criminal network connected to Roman DeLuca erupted into chaos. News of Vincent Hale's death spread rapidly through private channels. Some believed Adrian Voss orchestrated the betrayal. Others suspected Roman himself had become unstable. Longtime allies quietly distanced themselves while rival organizations began testing weakened territory lines across multiple cities. Roman's empire was starting to fracture from within, and everyone could feel it. Inside the mansion, security escalated to near-military levels. Armed guards occupied every major hallway, while encrypted calls continued nonstop between Roman's surviving allies. The estate no longer resembled a luxurious fortress. It resembled a kingdom preparing for collapse. Evelyn expected Roman to isolate himself completely after Vincent's betrayal. Instead, he brought her deeper into the war. At first, the decision made little sense. But Roman no longer trusted many people around him, and somehow, despite everything between them, he trusted Evelyn more than most of his own organization. That realization terrified her. Several nights later, Roman summoned Evelyn into the underground operations room beneath the mansion. Massive digital screens displayed financial records, shipping routes, surveillance reports, and political communications spread across multiple countries. The scale of corruption stunned her. This was not ordinary organized crime anymore. It was an entire hidden system connecting corporations, trafficking networks, government officials, and private military groups through billions of dollars moving silently beneath public society. Roman stood near the center screen studying encrypted files while Marcus coordinated security updates nearby. Adrian Voss isn't trying to take territory, Roman explained calmly without turning around. He's trying to erase instability. Evelyn frowned slightly. What does that mean? It means people like me became inconvenient. The statement lingered heavily inside the room. Marcus looked away quietly. Roman finally turned toward Evelyn then, his expression darker than usual beneath the dim lighting. There was a time when these organizations followed rules, he continued. Violence stayed controlled. Civilians stayed outside business. Politicians took bribes quietly and pretended morality still existed. And now, Roman's jaw tightened faintly. Now greed replaced structure. Evelyn slowly began understanding something important. This war was not truly about money. It was about control over corruption itself. Adrian Voss represented a newer kind of criminal empire, one built without restraint, loyalty, or limits. Roman, despite his brutality, still operated under older principles that now looked almost obsolete compared to modern syndicates. That difference made him dangerous to both sides, especially because guilt still lived somewhere inside him. The emotional tension between Evelyn and Roman deepened quietly after that night, not through romance, through understanding. She began helping analyze financial records connected to her father's investigations. Years of surviving poverty had sharpened her ability to notice patterns others ignored. Hidden shell corporations, altered shipping numbers, offshore transfers disguised beneath charitable foundations. Slowly, she started uncovering connections Roman's advisors had missed for years. And the deeper she looked, the uglier the truth became. Several respected political leaders secretly funded trafficking operations through international construction projects. Federal officials accepted payments to redirect investigations. Even charitable organizations connected to missing women operated as recruitment pipelines for underground auctions. America's public system was infected far deeper than Evelyn imagined. One intellectual realization struck her harder than anything else. The most dangerous criminals in the world rarely carried weapons themselves. They carried immunity. Late one evening, while reviewing old archive files beside Roman inside the underground study, Evelyn uncovered something unexpected. Thousands of classified documents hidden beneath encrypted folders, surveillance recordings, financial ledgers, murder reports, evidence against Roman's own organization. Her pulse slowed instantly. "You've been collecting evidence against yourself," she said quietly. Roman looked at the files for several moments before answering. "Not against myself. Against the Empire." The silence that followed confirmed the truth. For years, Roman DeLuca had secretly built enough evidence to destroy nearly every major criminal network connected to his organization. Evelyn stared at him in disbelief. "Why?" Roman leaned back slowly against the desk, exhaustion shadowing his face beneath the harsh archive lights. "Because eventually people like me stop believing we deserve to survive forever." The answer carried no self-pity, only acceptance. And for the first time since meeting him, Evelyn saw the weight Roman truly carried beneath the violence. Not pride, guilt. That night became the first time Roman spoke openly about his past. Not completely, but enough. His family had been murdered when he was 19 after his father attempted leaving organized crime permanently. Rival factions slaughtered nearly everyone connected to the DeLuca name within days. Roman survived only because an older syndicate leader used him as leverage during the aftermath. Violence became survival. Survival became power. And power slowly erased everything human inside him. "I spent years convincing myself numbness was strength," Roman admitted quietly. "It's easier to rule people when nothing affects you anymore." Evelyn studied him carefully across the dim underground room. "But it did affect you." Roman looked toward the evidence files silently. "Yes." That single word revealed more vulnerability than any confession could have. Evelyn suddenly understood why Adrian Voss hated him so deeply. Roman still remembered guilt, and guilt made powerful men unpredictable. The following weeks pushed them closer emotionally in ways neither expected. They worked side by side for hours analyzing corruption networks connected to Daniel Carter's disappearance. Sometimes they argued. Sometimes silence carried the conversations. Neither of them knew how to speak aloud. But fear slowly stopped controlling every interaction. Evelyn still distrusted parts of Roman, yet she no longer saw him as only a monster. And Roman, despite years of emotional isolation, started allowing her closer to parts of himself nobody else reached anymore. The connection frightened both of them, because shared trauma creates intimacy long before love ever appears. Unfortunately, the outside world grew more violent each day. Assassination attempts escalated rapidly. One attack targeted Roman's armored convoy downtown, using military-grade explosives. Another infiltrated a private meeting through poisoned security staff. Marcus barely stopped a sniper hidden inside a neighboring construction site during a financial summit connected to Roman's remaining allies. Someone powerful wanted Roman dead immediately. Meanwhile, public investigations quietly began surfacing across media channels. Anonymous leaks exposed corruption tied to trafficking routes and political bribery. Several federal agencies suddenly reopened closed cases connected to missing women. The pressure tightening around Roman's empire became impossible to ignore. Even Sophia Moretti privately warned him one evening inside the mansion gardens. "You can still disappear," she told him carefully. "Take the evidence and leave before the entire system turns against you." Roman's attention shifted briefly toward Evelyn, standing near the balcony above. "They already have." Sophia followed his gaze silently and understood exactly what he meant. Days later, Evelyn uncovered financial transfers linking Adrian Voss directly to multiple senators and federal judges. The discovery represented catastrophic leverage if released publicly. Roman immediately prepared emergency relocation plans afterward, because once political figures became vulnerable, retaliation usually followed fast. That same night, the estate hosted one final private gathering with Roman's remaining allies. Wealthy businessmen, criminal intermediaries, and political representatives arrived under heavy security, while storms gathered beyond the mountains surrounding the property. The atmosphere felt wrong from the beginning. Too tense, too quiet. Evelyn noticed Roman watching the windows repeatedly throughout the meeting, his instincts clearly unsettled. Then everything happened at once. The glass exploded first. A suppressed sniper round tore through the mansion windows before anyone understood the threat. Chaos erupted instantly. Guards drew weapons. Guests screamed. Marcus tackled several people toward the floor, while additional gunfire shattered marble walls across the state hall. Evelyn turned toward Roman, just in time to see blood spread across his chest. The sniper shot hit hard enough to throw him backward. Time seemed to stop. Roman collapsed against her before she could fully react, his weight dragging both of them toward the floor beneath the screaming panic surrounding the mansion. Blood soaked rapidly through Evelyn's hands as she caught him. Outside, police sirens suddenly echoed from every direction around the estate. And for the first time since entering Roman DeLuca's world, Evelyn realized the Empire might finally be dying around them. The blood on Evelyn's hands stayed there long after Roman lost consciousness. Even as Marcus Kane dragged them through hidden emergency corridors beneath the mansion, even as gunfire echoed above their heads and police sirens surrounded the estate from every direction, the image refused to leave her mind. Roman collapsing against her. Weak, human, mortal. It was the first time Evelyn truly understood something terrifying. Men like Roman DeLuca looked untouchable only until the moment they started bleeding. The underground tunnel beneath the estate descended nearly 3 levels below the mansion before connecting to an armored transport route hidden inside the mountains. Emergency lights flashed crimson along the concrete walls while Marcus barked orders through encrypted communications. North exits compromised. Federal teams entering lower grounds. Voss's men are inside the west perimeter. The Empire was collapsing in real time. Roman drifted in and out of consciousness beside Evelyn during the escape. Blood continued soaking through the bandages Marcus applied hastily inside the moving armored vehicle. The sniper round had missed his heart by inches, but the damage remained severe. Still, Roman's first coherent words, after waking briefly, were not about himself. They got the files? Marcus looked toward him through the rear-view mirror. Some. Roman closed his eyes again slowly. Not relief, disappointment. That disturbed Evelyn deeply, because even dying had not become his greatest fear anymore. Failure had. Hours later, they reached a hidden safe house outside Philadelphia, an abandoned cathedral renovated into a secure operations site years earlier, during one of Roman's older wars. Rain hammered against the stained glass windows while armed guards sealed entrances and monitored emergency radio frequencies. The atmosphere inside felt less like refuge and more like aftermath. Nobody believed safety still existed. By sunrise, the news exploded publicly. Federal raids struck dozens of properties connected to Roman's organization across multiple states. Warehouses, financial offices, private compounds, and political safe houses were seized simultaneously. Arrest warrants targeted major criminal intermediaries, while media outlets flooded television broadcasts with leaked surveillance footage connected to trafficking operations and money laundering schemes. The world Roman controlled was being ripped apart piece by piece. And somewhere behind it all, Vincent Hale's betrayal finally revealed its full damage. Marcus uncovered encrypted records proving Vincent had secretly worked with Adrian Voss for nearly 3 years. Financial transfers, leaked operational routes, assassination schedules. Vincent systematically weakened Roman's empire from inside while pretending loyalty publicly. The betrayal reached deeper than business. Vincent had helped organize the very auction where Evelyn was sold. Roman discovered that truth 2 nights later, while reviewing intercepted communications inside the cathedral's underground archive room. The moment he read the transaction logs, something inside him visibly shifted. Silence settled heavily through the room, while the screen illuminated names connected to the auction funding, board members, political donors, senior figures from Roman's own organization, people who publicly served under his authority. Evelyn watched the realization hit him slowly. The auction had not been organized by outsiders alone. His own empire helped finance it. Roman stared at the evidence for a long time before speaking. "I built this," he said quietly. The words carried no anger, only exhaustion. For years, Roman convinced himself he controlled the darkness surrounding his organization. But the truth was worse. The darkness evolved beyond him long ago, and innocent people paid the price. Evelyn expected him to react violently after learning the truth. Instead, he looked emotionally hollow. That frightened her more. Outside the safe house, the world continued turning against him rapidly. Media channels suddenly released Evelyn's photograph publicly alongside fabricated stories portraying her as Roman's accomplice. Corrupt officials labeled her connected to financial crimes and trafficking operations. Anonymous news sources questioned whether she voluntarily participated in underground networks. The strategy worked perfectly. Destroy her credibility before she could expose theirs. Evelyn watched television broadcasts one evening inside the cathedral library while reporters dissected her life without knowing anything about it. Victim became suspect overnight. The realization hardened something inside her permanently. Fear stopped controlling her after that. Because once the world begins lying about you publicly, survival becomes less about reputation and more about truth. Roman noticed the change immediately. "You should leave while you still can," he told her later that night. Evelyn looked up from the financial files spread across the table. "And go where? Anywhere not connected to me. You still think this is only about you." Roman's expression darkened faintly. "It became about you the moment they started hunting you publicly." Evelyn studied him carefully across the dim cathedral lighting. Weeks earlier, she would have accepted fear as reason enough to run. But too much truth surrounded her now. Too many people disappeared because powerful men counted on silence. "No," she answered quietly. "It became about me when they decided my life was disposable." The statement lingered between them heavily. And for the first time since meeting Evelyn Carter, Roman saw not someone surviving his world, but someone becoming dangerous inside it. As days passed, violence erupted across the criminal network Roman once controlled. Rival factions fought openly for abandoned territory, while federal agencies exploited the chaos through additional raids and arrests. Entire alliances collapsed overnight. The empire no longer obeyed anyone. It was consuming itself. Sophia Moretti remained one of the few allies still moving freely between surviving contacts. Elegant as always, she operated quietly across collapsing political circles, gathering intelligence, while helping Roman avoid immediate capture. But even Sophia understood the situation worsening beyond repair. One evening, she arrived at the cathedral visibly shaken after escaping surveillance downtown. "Federal warrants are expanding," she warned. "Judges, senators, corporate executives, everyone's turning on each other." Marcus looked grim. "And Voss? He's buying protection faster than investigations can move." Roman remained silent while studying updated financial reports across the table. Sophia's eyes eventually shifted toward him carefully. "You know this ends with everything burning." Roman finally looked up. "Yes." The answer came too easily. Because somewhere deep inside himself, Roman had already accepted the collapse emotionally long before it became reality physically. Power no longer interested him. Only consequences did. That realization transformed the atmosphere between him and Evelyn gradually. Emotional honesty began replacing manipulation. Not completely, but enough. Late one night, Evelyn found Roman alone inside the cathedral's abandoned prayer hall, staring silently toward shattered stained glass windows illuminated by distant city lights. The wound near his chest still limited movement, but he ignored pain almost habitually now. "You haven't slept," Evelyn observed quietly. Roman gave a faint, humorless smile. "Neither have you." The exhaustion between them felt strangely intimate, not romantic. Human. Evelyn slowly approached the damaged altar nearby before speaking again. "When did you stop wanting power?" Roman's attention lingered on the broken glass overhead for several moments. "The night I realized violence doesn't end after winning." His voice sounded quieter than usual. "When you grow up surrounded by death, you start believing control can protect people. But power only changes who suffers first." Evelyn absorbed the words silently, because deep down she understood them too. Trauma changes people differently depending on survival. Some become afraid forever. Others become numb. Roman became both. And somewhere along the way, Evelyn stopped seeing herself as merely another victim trapped inside his world. She became someone capable of fighting back against it. Together, they began organizing evidence leaks strategically through anonymous channels connected to Daniel Carter's old investigations. Financial records, trafficking routes, political bribes, surveillance archives. Piece by piece, corruption spread publicly faster than officials could contain it. The consequences became catastrophic. Senators resigned unexpectedly. Corporate leaders vanished overseas. Federal agencies launched emergency investigations against their own departments. America's hidden criminal infrastructure was finally bleeding into public view, but exposure also made them more vulnerable than ever. Every release narrowed the number of powerful people capable of surviving the fallout, and desperate people become reckless. The ambush happened 3 nights later. Roman's remaining allies arranged a covert transfer through an abandoned shipping district outside New Jersey. The objective seemed simple: move encrypted evidence drives before federal interception teams located the cathedral's safe house. Instead, Adrian Voss's forces were already waiting. Gunfire erupted before the convoy fully entered the loading docks. Explosions tore through armored vehicles while mass shooters emerged from elevated warehouse positions across the harbor. Chaos swallowed everything instantly. Marcus coordinated defensive fire, while Roman pulled Evelyn behind concrete barriers as bullets shredded steel containers nearby. Several of Roman's remaining allies died within seconds. The betrayal ran deeper than expected. Again, someone leaked their location. One vehicle exploded violently near the eastern dock, throwing burning debris across the harbor pavement. Evelyn watched another ally collapse beside her, blood spreading rapidly beneath his body, while sirens echoed faintly in the distance. The war had stopped resembling organized crime entirely. Now it looked like collapse. Roman fought with terrifying precision despite his injuries, but exhaustion slowed him visibly. Too many enemies, too many betrayals, too many years spent carrying violence like responsibility. Eventually, Marcus forced a retreat toward the emergency tunnels beneath the docks. Only 4 survivors escaped. Everyone else died there. Hours later, hidden inside another temporary safe house, Evelyn sat alone trying to steady her shaking hands when her secured phone vibrated unexpectedly. Unknown number. No traceable origin. Only 4 words appeared across the screen. Your father is alive. The message changed everything. For several minutes, Evelyn simply stared at the glowing screen inside the dark safe house room, while rain tapped softly against the boarded windows nearby. Your father is alive. 4 words. That was all it took to unravel years of grief, anger, confusion, and silence. Part of her wanted to believe it instantly. Another part understood how dangerous hope could become in a world built for manipulation. Marcus traced the message origin within minutes, but the encrypted routing led through multiple dead servers connected to old federal protection programs. Whoever sent it knew exactly how to disappear digitally. Roman read the message without visible reaction at first, but Evelyn noticed a shift in his expression immediately. He believed it. That frightened her more than the message itself. 2 hours later, they moved again. The remaining members of Roman's fractured network guided them toward an isolated federal safe house hidden deep inside rural Virginia. Abandoned farmland surrounded the property for miles, while heavily armed security checkpoints blocked every access road leading toward the compound. It looked less like protection, more like imprisonment disguised as safety. As the vehicle approached the final gate, Evelyn's pulse became unbearable. For years, she buried memories of her father carefully because grief hurt less than uncertainty. She trained herself to accept his death emotionally because mourning eventually becomes survivable. But hope reopened wounds permanently. Roman remained silent beside her during the drive, though Evelyn occasionally caught him watching her quietly, not controlling, not calculating, concerned. That difference still unsettled her after everything they survived together. The gates finally opened. Inside the compound, armed federal officers escorted them through sterile underground corridors lined with reinforced steel doors and surveillance systems. The atmosphere carried the cold efficiency of institutions built around secrecy. Nobody spoke unnecessarily. Nobody relaxed. Eventually, they stopped outside a secured observation room. An older federal agent turned toward Evelyn carefully. He's been under classified protection for nearly 14 years. The man explained quietly. Officially, Daniel Carter died overseas during an intelligence operation connected to organized crime investigations. Evelyn struggled to breathe evenly. Why? The agent hesitated briefly before answering. Because too many powerful people wanted him erased permanently. The door opened slowly, and Evelyn Carter saw her father alive for the first time since childhood. The emotional impact hit violently. Daniel Carter looked older than the memories she carried. Gray streaks lined his dark hair now, while years of exhaustion rested permanently across his face. But his eyes remained unmistakably familiar. Her eyes. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Then Daniel stepped forward carefully, emotion breaking to the composure years of hiding had forced onto him. Evelyn, the sound of her name in his voice, shattered something inside her instantly. All the grief she buried for years returned at once. Anger, relief, confusion, loss. She wanted to embrace him and hate him simultaneously. Instead, tears finally escaped despite every attempt to control them. "You were alive," she whispered. Not accusation, not question, just pain. Daniel's expression collapsed beneath the weight of it. "I never wanted you pulled into this. But you left me there." The words cut harder than shouting could have, because both of them knew exactly what there meant. Years of poverty, abandonment, fear, a life destroyed by secrets she never understood. Daniel closed his eyes briefly before answering. "They told me your deaths would follow if I contacted you." Evelyn looked away immediately. Part of her understood the logic already. The organizations hunting Daniel Carter had murdered entire families to protect themselves before. But understanding survival did not erase betrayal emotionally. Nothing could. Roman stayed near the doorway silently throughout the reunion, watching the exchange with unreadable restraint. Yet Daniel's attention eventually shifted toward him heavily. For the first time, tension entered the room sharply. "You shouldn't have brought her into your world," Daniel said coldly. Roman met his gaze calmly. "Your enemies already had." Silence followed, because neither man could fully deny the truth anymore. Over the next several hours, Daniel revealed everything he had hidden for years. The corruption networks ran deeper than Evelyn imagined. Trafficking operations connected directly to government contracts, military suppliers, corporate foundations, and international banking systems. Entire political careers depended on keeping those networks protected. But the most devastating truth involved Roman's family. Years earlier, Roman's father unknowingly helped transport financial assets connected to trafficking organizations while attempting to stabilize old Mafia alliances across Europe and the United States. Eventually, he discovered the true nature of those operations and tried stopping them. That decision triggered the massacre destroying most of the DeLuca family. Roman absorbed the information silently, while Daniel continued explaining old investigations spread across classified files. For the first time, Evelyn saw genuine conflict break through Roman's emotional control, because the sins destroying his empire began long before he inherited it. The realization looked unbearable. "Your father tried to expose them," Daniel admitted quietly. "But by then the system had already infected too many governments." Roman stared toward the concrete wall for several moments. "All those years," he said quietly, "I thought power would let me control it." Daniel's response came softly. "Sometimes the most dangerous prisons are built from loyalty instead of chains." The statement settled heavily through the room, especially for Roman, because loyalty trapped him inside violence long after survival stopped requiring it. The following days became preparation for war. Adrian Voss finally understood the threat growing against him. With Daniel Carter alive, Roman's evidence network expanding, and federal investigations accelerating publicly, Voss faced total destruction unless he eliminated everyone involved immediately. So he prepared for full-scale retaliation. Meanwhile, Evelyn transformed completely. The frightened woman once trapped beneath auction lights no longer existed. She helped organize public testimony records, coordinated evidence transfers, identified financial connections across trafficking networks. Even Marcus Kane began treating her less like someone needing protection and more like someone capable of surviving the battlefield herself. Fear no longer controlled her decisions. Purpose did. Roman noticed the transformation more than anyone. One evening, while reviewing final evidence packages inside the safe house operations room, he watched Evelyn move confidently between federal analysts and encrypted data systems with quiet focus. She changed everything. Marcus muttered nearby. Roman answered without looking away from her. No, she survived everything. The distinction mattered deeply, because Evelyn stopped defining herself through victimhood long ago, and Roman increasingly realized redemption depended on destroying the empire rather than saving it. Their emotional connection deepened quietly during those final days before confrontation, not through dramatic confessions, through honesty, real honesty. Late one night, Evelyn found Roman alone outside the compound, overlooking distant mountains beneath cold moonlight. Fresh bruises still marked his injuries from recent attacks, while exhaustion shadowed every movement he made. Yet for the first time since meeting him, he looked emotionally unguarded, not weak, just tired of carrying violence alone. "You're thinking about leaving," Evelyn observed softly. Roman gave a faint smile without humor. "There won't be much left to leave." She stepped beside him quietly. "What happens after this?" Roman remained silent for several moments, then finally answered with brutal honesty. "I honestly don't know." The admission mattered more than promises could have, because powerful men like Roman rarely admitted uncertainty. Evelyn studied him beneath the pale moonlight carefully. Somewhere between fear, betrayal, survival, and war, her feelings toward him had become dangerously real. Not because he saved her, because he changed for her, and she changed beside him. That terrified her more than death ever had. Before either could say more, emergency alarms erupted across the compound. Marcus's voice thundered through security radios instantly. "Attack incoming." Everything exploded into chaos. Gunfire erupted from surrounding tree lines, while armored vehicles smashed through the outer security barriers. Adrian Voss's forces flooded the compound with military precision, overwhelming federal defenses faster than anyone anticipated. The final war had arrived. Roman reacted immediately, pulling Evelyn toward reinforced corridors while security teams exchanged automatic fire throughout the compound. Explosions tore through concrete walls as smoke filled the underground levels. Daniel Carter remained trapped inside the archive sector with the evidence drives. Voss wanted everything destroyed. Roman made his decision instantly. "Get her out," he ordered Marcus. Marcus grabbed Evelyn's arm, but she resisted immediately. "No." Roman's eyes locked onto hers through the chaos. "You testify publicly," he said firmly. "That's how this ends." Another explosion shook the hallway violently. Evelyn realized the truth then. Roman fully intended sacrificing himself if necessary. "You're not staying behind." "I don't have a choice anymore." The pain hidden beneath his calm expression nearly broke her. For years, Roman DeLuca survived by controlling violence. Now, he was choosing redemption instead, even if it killed him. The final confrontation erupted near the central archive room minutes later. Federal agents, surviving security teams, and Voss's attackers collided in brutal close-range combat beneath flashing emergency lights. Adrian Voss finally appeared personally during the chaos. Cold-eyed, precise, smiling without humanity. "You should have stayed numb," Voss told Roman calmly while armed men surrounded the corridor. "Guilt made you weak." Roman stepped forward despite blood, soaking through reopened wounds near his chest. "No," he answered quietly. "It made me remember." Gunfire exploded instantly. The battle became impossible to track clearly after that. Bodies fell across the archive hall, while alarms screamed through collapsing systems overhead. Evelyn tried reaching Roman through the chaos, just as Voss's final shooter emerged from the smoke behind him. The shot hit Roman before anyone could react. He staggered backward violently, and Evelyn felt her entire world stop moving as Roman collapsed to the floor beneath the flashing emergency lights. Just moments before she could finally tell him she loved him. The gunshot echoed through Evelyn's mind long after the chaos finally ended. Even weeks later, she still remembered the exact sound Roman's body made when it hit the concrete floor beneath the archive lights. The memory followed her through hospital corridors, sleepless nights, federal interrogations, and every silent moment where fear returned unexpectedly. Because for the first time in her life, losing someone terrified her more than surviving alone. Roman DeLuca survived the shooting by less than 3 minutes. The bullet tore through his side, damaging multiple organs before emergency teams finally stabilized him during transport. The surgery lasted nearly 7 hours, while federal agents locked down the hospital floor, and reporters flooded every news station across the country. By morning, America finally knew the truth. The criminal empire hidden beneath political institutions had begun collapsing publicly. Names once protected by wealth and influence now dominated headlines beside trafficking evidence, financial crimes, and murder investigations. Senators disappeared from office overnight. Corporate executives faced federal indictments. International accounts connected to organized crime froze across multiple countries. The system Daniel Carter spent decades trying to expose was finally bleeding into daylight, and Roman's empire collapsed with it. But the destruction reached deeper than anyone expected. Evelyn sat beside Roman's hospital bed during the worst nights after surgery, watching machines breathe rhythmically while bruises and scars covered the man once feared by entire criminal networks. He looked different, unconscious, not dangerous, just exhausted. The emotional aftermath hit harder once survival replaced adrenaline. Too many people were dead. Marcus Kane disappeared completely after the final attack, leaving behind only encrypted files and burned safe houses. Sophia Moretti's body was never officially recovered after sacrificing herself during the compound evacuation. Federal investigations consumed hundreds of lives connected to the criminal empire, including innocent victims caught beneath decades of corruption. Even Daniel Carter was arrested shortly after agreeing to testify publicly, not because he created the corruption, because surviving inside it still carried consequences. Evelyn watched federal agents escort her father into protective custody through courthouse cameras, while reporters shouted questions across flashing lights. The image hurt more than she expected. For years, she dreamed about finding him alive. Reality turned out far more complicated than fantasy. Still, Daniel accepted the arrest quietly. He understood something most people never did. Sometimes truth destroys everyone connected to it equally. Meanwhile, Evelyn herself became one of the most recognizable faces in America almost overnight. News organizations labeled her everything imaginable: victim, witness, survivor, accomplice, hero, liar. The public could not decide whether Evelyn Carter represented strength or scandal. Interviews flooded every network after leaked documents confirmed she possessed direct evidence against politicians, trafficking financiers, and organized crime operations. She agreed to testify anyway, not because she trusted the system fully, because silence had already destroyed too many lives. The hearings lasted weeks. Inside crowded federal chambers, Evelyn recounted everything publicly: the underground auction, the trafficking network, the political corruption, the violence hidden beneath wealth and influence. Cameras broadcast her testimony nationwide, while powerful men avoided eye contact from behind legal teams and security officers. At first, fear nearly consumed her again. Then something changed. The more truth she spoke aloud, the less power fear seemed to carry anymore. Roman watched several hearings quietly from the rehabilitation facility, where private doctors continued monitoring his recovery. Federal immunity agreements protected him temporarily due to the evidence he provided, but the public remained divided about him. Some still viewed him as a criminal pretending redemption. Others saw something more complicated: a man raised inside violence who eventually chose to destroy the empire rather than preserve it. Roma himself no longer seemed interested in defending his reputation. Power had finally stopped mattering. 3 months after the shooting, he walked again without assistance for the first time. Evelyn found him standing outside the rehabilitation center balcony, overlooking the ocean just before sunrise. Cold wind moved through his dark hair, while fading scars remained visible near his neck and hands. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Silence between them had changed completely now. It no longer felt dangerous, only honest. "You should still be resting," Evelyn said softly. Roman glanced toward her with the faintest hint of amusement. "You sound like Marcus." The mention of Marcus Kane carried quiet grief beneath it. Neither of them truly knew whether he survived the final war. Part of Roman believed Marcus disappeared intentionally to escape the collapsing empire. Another part suspected something worse. Loss had become too familiar to separate hope from reality anymore. Evelyn slowly stepped beside Roman against the balcony railing. "The prosecutors offered reduced sentencing again," she told him carefully. Roman stared toward the ocean horizon. And they want names you haven't given them. His expression darkened faintly. There are no names left worth protecting. That statement revealed how deeply he had changed. The old Roman DeLuca would have died defending his empire. This version seemed relieved watching it disappear. Weeks later, after the final hearings concluded, the remaining foundations of Roman's criminal organization officially collapsed. Federal seizures dismantled financial operations across multiple countries, while surviving syndicate leaders either fled or turned against each other publicly. For the first time in decades, the DeLuca Empire stopped existing. And strangely, Roman looked lighter without it. The emotional distance between him and Evelyn slowly disappeared afterward. Not suddenly, not dramatically. Quietly, they learned each other outside survival for the first time. Morning coffee shared in silence without discussing violence. Long walks through isolated coastal towns where nobody recognized them immediately. Conversations about ordinary things neither experienced properly before. Books, music, dreams, regrets. For years, both of them survived by expecting betrayal eventually. Trust felt unnatural at first, then necessary. One evening, nearly 6 months after the final attack, Evelyn found Roman sitting alone near the beach house fireplace, reviewing old newspaper articles connected to the investigations. The firelight softened the scars across his hands. "You still think about all of it constantly," she observed. Roman didn't deny it. "When you spend your entire life building something poisonous," he said quietly, "you don't stop seeing the damage overnight." Evelyn sat beside him carefully. "You also destroyed it." Roman looked toward her then, something vulnerable finally visible beneath the emotional restraint he carried for years. "That doesn't erase what I was." "No," Evelyn admitted softly, "but it matters what you chose afterward." The honesty between them felt terrifying in a completely different way now, because neither of them hid behind fear anymore. Roman eventually reached into his jacket pocket before placing a small silver key onto the table between them. Evelyn frowned slightly. "What's that?" "The estate in Florence," he answered calmly. "It's legally yours now." She stared at him in confusion. "Why would you give me that?" Roman's expression remained steady. "Because for the first time in your life, I want you to have something that doesn't require surviving anyone to keep it." The emotional weight of the gesture nearly broke her composure. Not because of the property, because there were no conditions attached. No control, no ownership, nothing, just choice. And suddenly Evelyn understood something important about Roman DeLuca that took her far too long to realize. The man who once bought her freedom with violence now wanted to give her a life where she owed him absolutely nothing. That realization changed everything. Several days later, Roman finally answered the question Evelyn carried since escaping the mansion months earlier. They sat together beneath the quiet evening lights outside the coastal house, while waves crashed softly beyond the cliffs nearby. "When I escaped the estate," Evelyn asked carefully, "why did you smile after finding my plan?" Roman looked down briefly, almost remembering the moment. "Because you still fought." Evelyn stayed silent. Roman's voice softened slightly as he continued. "Everyone who entered that world eventually surrendered parts of themselves just to survive it. Fear changes people. It teaches them obedience." He looked toward her fully then. "But you never stopped trying to stay free." The answer settled deeply inside her chest. "You let me go. I needed to know you'd choose freedom over safety." Evelyn felt emotion tighten painfully in her throat. "And if I never came back?" Roman gave the smallest, saddest smile she had ever seen from him. "Then at least one good thing would have escaped my world." For several seconds, she could not speak at all, because suddenly every moment between them made sense. Roman never truly wanted ownership. He wanted proof she remained herself despite everything designed to break her. And somewhere during all the fear, violence, betrayal, and survival, Evelyn realized she stopped being afraid of him long ago. Maybe the moment he refused to touch her at the auction. Maybe the night he let her escape. Maybe when he chose redemption over power. She honestly did not know anymore. All she knew was that the man sitting beside her no longer resembled the ruthless Don who walked into that underground ballroom months earlier. And neither did she. Their private ceremony happened quietly near the coastline weeks later. No politicians, no criminal alliances, no contracts, no manipulation disguised as protection. Only a small gathering beside the ocean where two emotionally scarred people chose each other freely for the first time in their lives. Roman never asked for promises. Evelyn never surrendered her independence. That was precisely why it mattered. Peace finally began feeling possible afterward, until the envelope arrived. No return address, no fingerprints, only a single flash drive hidden inside. Roman played the footage late that night, while Evelyn stood beside him silently in the darkened living room. Security footage appeared across the screen from the night Evelyn first escaped the mansion during the storm months earlier. At first, nothing looked unusual. Then another figure stepped briefly into camera view near the underground tunnel exit. A familiar face neither of them expected to ever see again. Marcus Kane,